We've now got our register form displaying to the screen, which completes our get method from the function. Now, we need to build our post method functionality, so the data from our form can be actioned. Within our app.py file in the register function, we need to add some conditional formatting to check if the request.method is equal to post. I'll add some comments along the way, so it's easier to identify what each step is doing. First, we need to check if the username from our form element already exists within the database. We'll assign that to a new variable called existing_user. This needs to use the find_one method from our users collection on MongoDB, and we're going to check if the Mongo username field matches that of the input field for username on our form. We're going to store our users in lowercase to make it easier to find them, so we'll want to compare the username field using the .lower method. This line is quite long and not PEP8 compliant, so hit enter after the opening bracket of find_one. Next, still within our post method, make sure to remove any white space for blank lines and tab back to the proper indentation. If there is a match in the database, and our new existing_user variable is truthy, we want to display a message to the user on screen using a flash message. Username already exists. Then, we need to redirect the user back to the URL for the same register function, so that they can try again with another username. Create a blank line without any white space, and still within the post method, we'll gather the data from the form, which acts as the else statement if no existing user is found. Our variable register will be a dictionary, which will be inserted into the database shortly. The first item in our dictionary will be username, and that will be set to grab the username value from our form using the name attribute. Remember, we want to store this into the database as lowercase letters. Use a comma to separate each dictionary item. Our next item in the dictionary will be password, and this is where we get to use some of the Werkzeug.security helpers we learned about in the previous video. We're going to generate a password hash from the user's input provided from the password name attribute. As a challenge, you can customize the hash and salt methods to your own preference, but we're going to use the standard method for the purpose of this video. If you were to include a secondary password field to confirm the user's password, you would want to do that prior to building this dictionary here. Now we can call the users collection on MongoDB and use the insert_one method. Insert1 requires a dictionary to be inserted, and since we've stored our dictionary inside of a variable called register, we can just use that. Create another blank line without white space, but include proper indentation. We then want to put the newly created user into session, like a temporary page cookie, using the session function we've imported at the top of this file. The session key in square brackets can be whatever we'd like to call it, but we'll call ours user for now. Again, we're going to target the form element for the username field and make it lowercase to keep things consistent. After the username is placed into our session cookie, we'll display a flash message to the user. Registration successful. Save the file and then reload the page. You might get a prompt to resubmit the form from our last video, but just hit cancel and load the page with an empty form. Create a username, then a password, and click on the submit button. So far so good. No errors have displayed, so the form will submit and the page will reload. Let's go to our MongoDB page, and from within our cluster dashboard, click on the Collections button. Make sure you're on the correct database for the task manager, and then let's click on our users collection. Excellent. You can see that we now have one registered user added to our database. The username matches that of what I signed up with, but if you notice, the password is a rather long bunch of random data. Since we use the standard password hashing from Werkzeug, it's applied a normal SHA-256 method, which is just one way to salt a hashed password. If you refer to the Werkzeug docs, you can see more details about how this works, and some alternative methods to customize your own hashing. Let's return to our base template and provide some way for the flash messages to display to our users. First, we'll wrap the entire block content within a main element that has a materialized class of container, roughly 70% of the page width. Then, between the header and the main, let's add a section element. Our section will be where any Flash messages are displayed. Using the Jinja templating with block, we'll write with messages equals get underscore flashed underscore messages, open and closing brackets. Make sure to include the closing end with element. Next, we want to check if we have any messages. If messages, again include the closing end if. If there are messages, it's possible that there can be more than one, so let's iterate over each message in messages. For message in messages. Once more, close the end for. We'll create a row with the class of flashes, which we'll customize shortly. For each message, we'll display an H4 header with the background color of light blue, lighten 4, and center aligned. The message variable will be inserted here. Within our CSS file, let's add a bit of customization to the flash's H4 styling. The line height will be set to 2. Save all files, then let's reload the page to check our progress. It's okay if some of our previous Flash messages start to appear now. This is normal behavior, since they had nowhere to display previously and have been stored away until used. The final step for registration is to include some sort of defensive programming. Let's see what happens if we try to submit the form with just blank spaces only. It's definitely creating a new user with nothing but spaces for the credentials, which isn't ideal, and have a look on the MongoDB to confirm this. Go back to the register template and find the password input. We want to include a minimum length of 5, as well as a maximum length of 15, and then finally, the required attribute. We'll do the exact same for the username input. Minimum length of 5, maximum length of 15, and then the required attribute. However, let's take it one step further to help with our defensive programming. HTML inputs have a property called pattern, which allows us to use something called regular expressions, sometimes referred to as regex. Regex can be quite complex and slightly vary from language to language, but it doesn't need to be difficult. The caret tells our pattern that it's the start of a string. The dollar tells our pattern that it's the end of a string. Within square brackets, we need to specify what users can add on this input field. We'll keep it simple and allow users to include any letter from A to Z in lowercase, any letter from A to Z in uppercase, and any number 0 through 9. Within curly brackets, we can then specify the number of characters permitted, but we need to use a comma to separate the values, 5, 15. So to quickly recap, our pattern will now accept any alphanumeric usernames between 5 and 15 characters long. There are, of course, more advanced features to using regular expressions, but this should satisfy our basic requirements. Let's copy the full pattern and paste it below within our password field. Save the file, then reload the live preview. If we try to submit the form now, using nothing but spaces, you can see that the pattern recognition is throwing an error. We didn't tell our pattern that the user can allow spaces, only alphanumeric entries. If I try to put my first name and last initial, that's only 4 letters long, so it's also declining the username for being too short. As soon as I add a username that meets all criteria, our form validation is quite happy to allow me to proceed with registration. Later, we'll display the newly registered user's profile, but for now, we are redirecting back to the same page and advise that registration was successful. Let's go back to our project and push our fully functional registration over to GitHub. Git add -A, git commit -m, add register functionality, git push, then clear the screen.